pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty God, we pray this day for your ever-enduring guidance. We ask you, cloak us in wisdom and fortitude, that we may disperse our knowledge and facts intelligently among all humanity whom we serve. Amen.
Oh, so we're going to go back and forth then.
Richard, would you announce the items discussed in closed session,
I
please?
will. The board convened in closed session to have a conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, the Grace Foundation of Northern California versus Wells Fargo Bank et al., case number 30-20-0612863-CU-RC-CJC. And they also met with conference with legal counsel regarding significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, one case, and employee performance evaluation for Fair Manager Jim Walcott. Those three items have been continued to the end of the open session meeting, and there's no announcement.
You have the case number, but what,
Can you state your name for the recorder, please, and possibly state your name? State your name for the recorder, please.
Eileen Spencer, you have the case number there, but what court is it in? Orange County.
Orange County.
Orange County, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Agenda approval, additions or deletions?
Right. I would ask that you give me the attorney, and then we have Jim Victor.
Also, I'd like to ask that we adjourn the meeting today, and maybe we're going to check off talks for Mr. Pyle on this particular one, make sure that was added.
Okay. Any comments from the public on this?
Iona McCain here. I can't hear you guys. I have good hearing. You know, if I talk like this, open board meeting, just a little, please.
Thank you.
Speak up.
I need to pretend like I'm talking to my daughter.
That's right. Or your dog.
No, my daughter.
Must be a teenager.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion on the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Passes unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. This is the period normally, if you're here to comment on something that's not on the agenda, you can come forward at this time. Or if you, even if there is an item on the agenda, feel free to comment at this time if you can't stay for the actual item. Is there any public comment? Alrighty, seeing none, we will. I'd like to quickly move to item G, or consent calendar. Is there any items to be pulled? Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on anything on item G? Okay. Ms. Spencer?
E1,
Okay, we'll pull G1 and G4, looking for a motion for the balance. It's been moved and seconded to approve all items on the consent other than G1 and G4. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Passes unanimous. We'll take up G1. This is a personnel report.
The documents, or the report that's listed on the website lists Martin Nichols as being retired, and the newspaper reported him to be terminated. If you care to explain it?
I'd be happy to. The report was compiled by the Personnel Division, the CAO's department. The staff there understands that Mr. Nichols retired from CalPERS, and that's why it was placed under the retirement. That's separate from the contractual termination of the contract. It just as easily could have been included in losses. In hindsight, might have been more appropriate there, but that's why it was included. That report is for the purpose of notifying the Board of Supervisors of the movement of personnel, between departments, losses, hires, and so forth. So duly noted, it probably just as well could have been included in losses.
Do you know the date of the retirement? Does anybody know the date of the retirement?
I think it was the date of termination that he terminated.
I'm sorry?
The date that his employment terminated with Lassen County is also the date of his retirement.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So are we okay to approve that with the way it says?
I think it's fine.
Okay. For a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Passes unanimous. That will move us on to G4.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have Mr. Norwood give a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Supervisors, Galen Norwood, Assistant Director of Planning and Building Services. The Board of Supervisors authorized submittal of a grant application to bring our groundwater monitoring plan into compliance with state requirements. We submitted the grant application and were awarded $149,000, approximately. The dollar amount is on there. But the board, during the budget process, received a proposal from staff to execute this grant in-house. The tasks are listed on page 15, and it was felt that these were things that we could do. Thus, there won't be a consultant who will be performing these, and the cost, the grant funds will reimburse the county for staff time. This reaches back to when the state adopted legislation saying that if counties weren't going to do something with groundwater and we're going to monitor it and try to monitor it and see what's going on, the state would, and in which case the counties would be ineligible for funding for future grants and other projects. The board determined to be the monitoring entity. We're attempting to do that. One of the difficulties we had is on page 4. The state basically informed us that the wells that they've been monitoring for 30+ years don't qualify as CASGIM wells.
What is a CASGIM well?
CASGIM is an acronym for the legislation that was adopted in 2009, basically to require counties to get involved and to become monitoring entities if they want to have something to do with groundwater. It's a California. I don't even know if I can name what the acronym is, but it's a Lassen Local Groundwater Assistance.
It shows right here at the top of the California State Groundwater
Okay,
Cultivation Monitoring Program.
There you go. But it stems from that legislation to where counties were expected, if they wanted to be involved in groundwater, to start doing things. So we've been trying to do that, and like I said, the state informed us that the voluntary wells that DWR has been monitoring don't meet the requirements, in part because there's not completion information, there's not adequate permissions from landowners, and so on. So we have to go back and kind of put all the pieces together in terms of the monitoring grid, where the wells are going to be, obtain permissions from landowners, and get the public involved with this. So this grant will allow us to do that, to get out to the public, to identify where monitoring needs to be, obtain permissions for existing wells where we can, and the completion information, because there's a long record for those, and basically have a compliant groundwater monitoring plan. And this kind of ties in a lot of ways to the basin management objective ordinance that the board adopted to set in place a couple committees, one being a groundwater committee and one being a technical advisory committee. The groundwater committee is appointed by the board from people that reside in those basins, and the TAC is the technical experts that offer advice. This is meant to provide a report to the Board of Supervisors on the status of groundwater in the county. To date, there hasn't been, the clerk has advertised a couple times for those committees. We haven't had a lot of success. We're hoping that the outreach mentioned in this, because it's related, we can kind of fold into that as well, and hopefully get some interest in forming those committees and being able to generate the reports that ordinance requires. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, to emphasize, and I appreciate the letter the state sent Mr. Norwood in identifying the difference between these wells. And as of 2009 or 10, when the new law came into existence to the present, the fact that the wells are not in compliance with state law, is clearly defined. But to suggest that the information that was collected in the previous 27 years when the program was operating before the new standards and law was put into place is unacceptable, or is illegal, however you want to couch it and so forth, I think is disingenuous. They accepted the work that was done by the department and by the people involved with the program for 27 years, and now they adopt new standards, and they basically, in a de facto way, try to illegitimize, the previous work. I don't think that is kind of fair. Obviously, I think in order to be in compliance with the program today, you have to meet the new standards today. And to retroactively apply those standards to the previous, time period, I don't think is a legitimate action on their part or anybody to advance that. So. And I kind of get the impression that, the reason why they don't want to approve the program is not so much the compliance issues of today, but to try to impose that in a retroactive fashion. So I think we should, if we respond to these folks, need to make clear that, this was a program that they kind of basically hustled us to help them to do. We did what was done. We set up the monitoring program, and everybody gleaned the data from that, and that was done by DWR out of their Red Bluff office. It wasn't even done here locally. So we were basically took over the responsibility when they downsized their agency and they shifted this off to us. But I think what we should try to do is work with these various well owners where they're at and get the necessary certification documents and get those brought online so that the program can go forward. I mean, it's something that we need to know, and especially in this day and age with the lack of water that we're going to be seeing out there. This information is going to be extremely important.
Thank you. Darren?
And I agree with what Jim just said exactly. I mean, that's why I asked for this to be pulled. And to further Jim's information, I think, personally, I believe, the reason why they want to get rid of they're saying they can't use the old wells for information, is they want to get the new wells. They want to see what's more and more out there for the groundwater. Because this is just the state's way, I think, is to come in and take more control of the groundwater. Because I told you in our CRC, last meeting or whenever it was, sometime in there, one of the meetings they had in there on the water bond, that the state is going to consider groundwater state property. It's not going to be the private landowners. And as far as they don't, the construction of it, that's baloney. I mean, I've got well logs back from the 70s that I went back to DWR and got. You can get well logs on all this stuff. It tells you what the stratas were, how the well was constructed, how deep it is. They got all that information. It's just a bunch of baloney. And I don't know. I think we're just kind of we're falling into their game. They just got the carrot out, run the stick, and we're just jumping after it leaps and bounds. And I'm really thinking we should be backing away from this and we just take care of our own.
Well, it comes with, if I may provide something, it comes with consequences. Things like the grant that the RCD is working on, other things that are happening. Basically, it potentially becomes a gun to the head, or however you want to term it, to say, you know, if you're not doing this, these other things aren't going to happen, and, you know, we're not going to allow it. So, you know, just realize that, I guess. As part of this, they're also prioritizing groundwater basins in California. They've prioritized our basins as low and very low. There's various factors that go into that, and
That's because all this water comes that way.
well, that's
That's exactly.
I share a lot of your
They can't steal them.
but you know, but really, in reality, that's maybe not such a bad thing right now, because the basins that are high and very high, they're like really getting in there with those jurisdictions and just taking a hard look and just meddling a whole lot, I think. And so the fact that we're prioritized low and very low, I think, is in our favor. But, and that's part of that is a reflection of how the basins are doing. They're not doing as bad, I don't think. You know, last year when the board adopted the BMO ordinance, we looked at a lot of basins, not all the basins in the county, but we looked at a lot of them, and you know, we could see that kind of what the trends were over this 30-year period or more, and you know, for the most part, they were doing all right. And
No, you say that Honey Lake Basin is considered low. How about the north part of the county where the watershed goes to California?
all of Lassen County is classified under CASGEM, you know, that's a different component of CASGEM, as low and very low. So, you know, there's various factors that go into ranking those. This was a mechanism of the state to say, well, where are we going to start first? We need to get into groundwater, and we need to well, not just groundwater actually, but this was in relation to groundwater. Where are we going to start first? And they use this ranking protocol that's in that legislation to identify the basins that they were going to look at first. And those are primarily in the valley and, you know, places that you might imagine. And ours are all low or very low, just meaning that the state's not looking here on a big level, you know, right now as far as CASGEM is concerned. So.
Thanks. All right. So I had a question. So I recall this when it came up, and basically, so the 149,000 comes back to us, and we're basically gonna do this in-house. And that I also had this. I was considering pulling it, but for another reason. I mean, I think it should be you know, highlighted and give kudos. I mean, basically, you know, you guys took it upon yourself to go create some income by coming, you know, doing it in-house. And so like it says here, 149,000 is going to come back to our general fund, and we're going to be doing the work. And I mean, that's great stuff. I mean, you know, that's a couple of people's pay. So it's well done in that regard. Yeah, thanks.
Two things, Mr. Chairman. First of all, to comment on Mr. Alba's comments, if you go to page 14, there's a map that shows where all these wells and stuff are. And even though Mr. Norwood is saying that the state has declared the whole county as being low, you know, a significant portion, it's maybe a small area, but the northwest corner flows into the Sacramento drainage. And so it's far from being insignificant in terms of being a part of what's upstream and what they're looking at. And the same thing is true with the Clear Creek Westwood area in terms of how that flows into the Feather River drainage into California. So the bulk of the activity, of course, is in the Honey Lake Valley, and that all drains basically towards Nevada. I could see them discounting that as having any value. Believe me, these two areas, there are value. But I think, I'm with you, I think we should accept the funds, but I think rather than being micromanaged by them, and if you read some of the fine print in the back, you know, in terms of the clauses that they have, and there's several of them that kind of talk about how they can, on their own initiative, without amending the agreement stuff, they can cause this or do that. I mean, they've got several hooks and barbs in there to be aware of. I think we should proceed and try to do as much as we can, not so much in terms of drilling new wells, but go through the process that's described in the letter of bringing as many of these private wells that we can, working with those owners that are cooperative, to get them basically certified so they're part of this CAS-GIM type thing. I mean, be in compliance with the law so that we can kind of have more of a control rather than letting them set up some sort of an independent thing. And we need to know what that information is. I think that's going to be vital to our water future. So in that respect, I support what we're doing, but I think rather than just playing into their hands, which is in essence you can do, is I think we be smart about it and we be proactive in terms of pushing, the local interest. And we can do that by the way we administer the $149,000.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So task on page 15 of the task, and one of them is to contact current monitoring well owners and trying to bring those on. We definitely want to do all we can to make that happen because of the record, for one thing, and that pulls back to the public outreach that I was talking about at the start, how, to fold the BMO into this, the fact that we did, the board did establish some committees to look at groundwater basins and kind of tie the things together and get interest with the current owners to kind of become part of that. I totally agree.
How many wells does that affect? Is all these on the legend?
I think it's probably in here. I don't recall offhand exactly what the number is. It's around 120, 125.
And they're
in that
pretty
ballpark.
much.
Yeah, I started to count them.
Yeah.
Okay, again, I want to say thanks for you guys' effort, and thanks for getting $149,000 into our coffers and creating some work for us. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so any members of the public would like to comment on this item before we bring it back to the board? Iona?
Please. May I ask Mr. Norwood a question?
Sure. Yeah.
On the groundwater basins that you're referring to, when's the last time Lassen County has monitored these wells?
October, well, the northern region of the Department of Water Resources is continuing to monitor, kind of in cooperation with us. The wells are monitored in April and October.
Every
in the
year?
Spring and fall of every year, yeah.
You said Department of Water Resources,
Yes,
not the county.
yeah, in coordination with the county, but yes, the decision, of the Board of Supervisors at the time that the monitoring plan was adopted was to, if DWR is willing to continue monitoring, and there's an expense associated with that, to allow them to continue monitoring. We are in there, and we're with them, and we're watching what's going on, and we're, obviously we're through the BMO and other things, we're watching where the groundwater levels are, but they're still continuing to take an active role in the
So it is the
monitoring.
Department of Water Resources that's doing actual work.
The Red Bluff Northern Office that are doing portions of the active work. I think I would argue that the county is doing a lot more. The county's, in 2007 has adopted a groundwater management plan. Followed that, the county said, we want to be involved in groundwater. We want a monitoring plan. We are interested in grants like this. They authorize a submittal of the application. We're doing things like working on the basin management objectives for the subbasins within the county. And so, yes, while the DWR is helping us monitor and are continuing to monitor wells that they have monitored for 30 years,
So the
county
basin,
is in no way on the sideline.
there's a big basin that is shared with Washoe County that's up there by the Estelle Ranches. And I recall there was a big issue about the exportation of water from that water well that was drilled by the Estelle and exported 2 miles into Washoe County. That groundwater basin, has anybody checked it to see what the level of that is?
Want me to address the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I mean, that permit is a temporary permit. It comes with conditions, and we have verified that all the conditions are met. The board at the time, kind of hoping that this program that we're talking about here today, that we're hoping to kind of finalize, would come into play and will come online, said that if that happens, it's to be part of this program, or at least there's to be an offer for it to be part of that program. That offer has been made, and But as you've heard us present here today, there is currently not an approved CASGIM program. So there
So you
is
don't know
nothing
if it's
for it to
lowered?
be part of.
You
And
don't
that
know that's
permit-
lowered, the basin has
Well,
lowered.
if you want me to continue?
Sure, well, just for a minute.
Okay, well then, you know, the groundwater levels are relative compared to each other. So, you know, a level at one point in time on one well is, it tells you what that level is, and it tells you the fluctuation, and you know, there's pumping and there's other things happening, but it is the combined basin as a whole and how it's reacting and how the basin, groundwater basin is reacting that's important. And that's what we're trying to establish here. And that includes Surprise Valley, as well as there are other basins that are shared, Honey Lake being in Long Valley, and
So this is, this information, considering the ground level of the basin, is public knowledge. In other words, I can go up there and look at how the groundwater is, or the basin. But to me, basins are separate. You know, they're not all together, they're separate basins out there. If I have a water well for my water, my neighbor might not have the same basin or cannot connect up to it because it's not there. So they're not all connected. The groundwater basins, I'm talking about, not just the groundwater flow, but the groundwater basins are
No, I
not.
just want to know, I mean, I think it's irrelevant because it is questions pertaining to exactly this item, which is the groundwater, so, yeah.
Water is connected in a lot of different ways throughout the system. You know, groundwater basins, there can be aquifers that are shared, that are connected. There can be isolated ones that are deeper. There's a lot of factors that go, excuse me, that come into play. You know, the depth of the well, it's difficult to just oversimplify the question.
Okay. But if I wanted to, I can get that information from you, right? If I go up there and research it.
You can look at the permit, the permit is public record, and what the conditions are, that is public record as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I always ask you that, I'm sorry. DWR, are they still gonna do monitoring on the wells that they've been doing monitoring on for forever? Or are they gonna kind of plunge it off the there now?
Well, they're saying they are. You know, we're trying to position ourselves to be you know, to not have to rely upon them, and that's why we're going out when they're monitoring. We're, you know, seeing where things are. This process will definitely help a lot because we'll be reestablishing the permissions for it to come into the CASGIM program. Hopefully, we'll get a lot of the ones that currently exist. So, you know, we'll have that connection.
My next question is, are they charging you for this? Because the reason why I'm asking this is I've got a well that they come in and check, like you were just saying, and before the irrigation season, and after the irrigation season. And that well has been there ever since I can remember. And
Well-
so it was built in the sixties, and they're still using it to this day. But yet they're saying we have to do this other stuff. So I'm just curious if they're doing it on their own, if they're doing it in conjunction with you, and they're using my information, or, I'm just curious here.
Yeah, well, I share a lot of your business. You know, I think it's founded, yes, I think ultimately the state is, you know, we're paying for DWR. So the county and the public as a whole are paying for that. There's no direct billing for the monitoring that they do. You know, I think, in my opinion, I think it's in the mix there because it's part of, you know, the package we're getting with our taxes that we pay the state. So it's not direct, is the answer.
Okay, thank you. I think, Mr. Anderson, if you have something.
Well, no, Galen did a great job explaining. I just wanted to answer Iona's question. Specifically, did we do monitoring at the Estelle Ranch? No. We conditioned that permit. It expires this spring, I think. And we, as Galen said, planned on taking over CASGIM. It's my pessimistic feeling that we won't be taking over CASGIM very soon, but probably sometime in the future, and that's a game the state's going to play with us. And the reason that we're playing this game is it's the only game in town, and I think it's the only way we will retain, you know, our jurisdiction and our control over monitoring. When that happens, I think this was really just putting their toe in the pool to see what the temperature was with counties, but They just play these games and things are delayed. This grant was delayed significantly, tied up at the state, and I don't know why. And just as kind of a side note, one of the things that we originally asked for in this grant was some money to do a monitoring well, in specific places that would be really helpful. And kind of conversely to their argument that their wells